Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today. We are unpacking a genuinely fascinating topic that gets right down to the very core of how we live and work together. We're talking about direct democracy and consensus-based decision-making. We're going to break down exactly how self-governing communities actually function in the real world, and we'll look directly at the mechanics of how groups can reach agreements without having to rely on a traditional top-down boss. But before we get into the heavy stuff, let me ask you something. Have you ever tried getting 10 friends to agree on a pizza topping? I mean, it's absolute chaos, right? 3 people want pepperoni, 2 are strictly vegan, 1 is demanding pineapple, which, let's be honest, starts an entirely separate argument, and 3 people just keep saying, I don't care, whatever you guys want, while secretly caring very much. Now, I want you to imagine scaling that up. Imagine going from 10 friends and a pizza to an entire community making complex decisions about their resources, their infrastructure, or their laws. It sounds impossible, or at the very least, incredibly intimidating. But as you'll see, there is a tested, highly structured way to actually pull it off. Okay, let's dive into this. To get from that pizza-level chaos to functional community governance, we're going to follow a logical 5-step journey today. We'll start with the rules of the game, then look at the 6 steps to consensus, how to stop invisible elites, how we scale up, and finally, some real-world examples.
Starting off with Section 1, the rules of the game.
So, consensus-based decision-making is defined as the preferred process for reaching conclusions in self-governing communes. The absolute keywords you need to know here are horizontality and direct democracy. Basically, this just means removing that traditional pyramid shape of power, where one person at the top dictates everything to the people at the bottom. Instead, power is spread out horizontally. Everyone sits on the exact same level. But listen, for a flat structure to actually work and not just evolve into a giant shouting match, you need incredibly clear rules and dedicated roles. The most crucial role in this entire setup is the moderator. And really, the best way to understand them is to think of them exactly like a referee in a sports match. Referees don't actually play the game, right? They don't score points, they don't vote on the outcome, and they absolutely never take sides. Their sole responsibility is to make sure the process is fair and inclusive, and to ensure nobody gets too comfortable holding that whistle, the role of the moderator always rotates among the group members. Everyone takes a turn. Now, even with a fantastic referee, conflict is going to happen. It's human nature. But managing conflict in a direct democracy isn't about just suppressing the disagreement. Think of conflict kind of like a tangled fishing line. You don't just chop the line with scissors the second there's a knot. You have to patiently untangle it so you can cast again. This happens through active listening, where literally 0 interruptions are allowed. It happens through clarification, just to make sure people aren't aggressively arguing over a simple misunderstanding. And if things get really heated, well, it relies on mediation, where a voluntarily formed rotating committee helps restore the dialogue without forcing an outcome.
Moving right along to Section 2, 6 steps to consensus.
Let's walk sequentially through the actual life cycle of a community decision. It all kicks off with Step 1, a proposal. Anyone can write an idea down and bring it forward. Step 2 is clarification, where members just ask questions to make absolutely sure they understand what's being proposed. Step 3 is discussion, which is the open dialogue guided by our referee moderator, and there are usually strict time limits here to prevent rambling. Step 4 is modification, where the proposal gets tweaked to incorporate everyone's concerns. Step 5 is the consensus test, where the group actually checks to see if everyone is on board. And Step 6 is the final decision. You see how that works? Each step acts like a filter, carefully moving the group from one individual's idea to a collective agreement. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the concept of a block. During that consensus test step, a single member can block a proposal. But a block is not just a standard no vote. Think of a block as the emergency brake on a train. You only pull that emergency brake if there is a severe, immediate hazard on the tracks, like if a proposal directly violates the core principles of the commune, things like autonomy, mutual aid, or horizontality. You do not pull the emergency brake just because you dislike the scenery out the window. Blocks have to be deeply reasoned and justified to the group. Of course, getting 100% of people to agree on literally anything is tough. While 100% unanimity is absolutely the primary goal, communities still have to function in the real world. So, when unanimity fails, or there's an emergency that requires swift action, the group can adopt a modified consensus. This usually sits around a 70 to 80% threshold. This is crucial because it keeps the community moving forward rather than being permanently paralyzed by 1 or 2 holdouts who refuse to pull the emergency brake but also just refuse to agree. That brings us to Section 3, stopping the invisible elites.
Because here's the thing, even in a perfectly horizontal group, informal hierarchies have a sneaky way of creeping in. We call these the invisible elites. These are the folks who naturally speak a bit louder, who are maybe more charismatic, or who just tend to dominate a conversation. To stop this from happening, very practical structural safeguards are put into place. Groups will constantly rotate the speaking order. They use hand signals or physical speaking tokens, so you literally cannot talk unless it is your designated turn. They rotate not just the moderator, but the note taker and the timekeeper. It's a highly structured way to forcefully cultivate a culture where critique is welcomed, but domination is just absolutely resisted.
Section 4, scaling up. So this system works great for a local neighborhood council. But what happens when you need to run an entire city? Well, the solution lies in the fundamental difference between a representative and a delegate. In traditional systems, you elect a representative, and they go off to the Capitol to make decisions on your behalf. But in direct democracy, communities send delegates. And this brilliantly illustrates the mail carrier analogy. A delegate is literally just a mail carrier. If the neighborhood decides they want a new park, the delegate takes that exact message to the wider municipal assembly. A mail carrier doesn't get to open your mail, cross out your letter, and write a new one based on their own opinions, right? Delegates act strictly as messengers. To keep everything balanced as things scale up to that larger league, there are strict principles of jurisdiction. Notice the distinct boundary here between neighborhood autonomy and municipal scope. If a decision only affects a specific neighborhood, say exactly where to place the new community garden, that decision is strictly made locally. The larger municipal assembly cannot impose their will on the neighborhood for local issues. The municipal assembly only addresses matters that affect the whole commune, like widespread water infrastructure or transit.
Which brings us to Section 5, Real-World Direct Democracy.
I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds like a lovely utopian fantasy, but does it actually exist out there in the real world? The answer is absolutely yes. Here are 3 diverse examples directly from the source material showing where this is actively practiced. In Chiapas, Mexico, the Zapatistas govern their communities through local assemblies rooted in consensus and collective responsibility. Over in northern Syria, the region of Rojava relies on neighborhood councils as the foundation of their democratic system, with very specific structures to ensure women and minorities have an equal say. And right here in the United States, in Jackson, Mississippi, an initiative called Cooperation Jackson utilizes consensus models within worker co-ops and local assemblies. So these are real, diverse regions actively utilizing the very mechanics we just outlined.
But to make all those mechanics actually work, we have to recognize a really fundamental truth, beautifully captured here. Direct democracy is not only a structure, but also a culture of solidarity. It requires patience, empathy, and trust. You can have all the rotating moderators, the hand signals, and the speaking tokens in the world, but if members don't approach the process with a genuine sense of goodwill, if they don't assume honest intentions from their neighbors, the whole system falls apart. It's not just about administrative efficiency, it's about actually strengthening the emotional bonds of the community. Which leaves us with this final thought. Direct democracy absolutely requires a rigid architecture of rules to ensure fairness, but the fuel that actually runs the engine is a culture of trust. So the ultimate question isn't just whether we can figure out the technical rules for sharing power, but rather, are we actually ready to assume honest intentions in our own communities? Kind of give you something to think about the next time you're trying to agree on that pizza topping, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a clear, structured view into the fascinating mechanics of direct democracy.